Harvey Weinstein was at the Oscars last night, and I know you guys are going to be like, what are you on? But this is what the internet started saying. And when people across the internet start looking closer at one moment that came up on the broadcast, the connection that they found was stranger than anyone expected. And it's a connection I came across last year. So there's an old saying in Hollywood that power never really disappears. It just changes rooms. So watching the Oscars last night, that idea felt strangely literal, because even though Harvey Weinstein himself was nowhere near the ceremony, there's still a lot of signs and visuals that his world is still very much there, and he might be too. People watching probably didn't notice at first, but we're gonna get into it, and it is shocking. But real quick, I'm Lauren Paritra. Willa Paritra is sleeping right behind me, and I'm gonna ask you to take a quick moment to make sure you're subscribed. This podcast is fully bootstrapped and fully people powered, and we exist as a counter to the constant stream of right-wing madness that dominates so much of this media landscape. I put my career on hold to do this. So subscribe, follow, share, comment, 6 words or more. Every bit of support helps keep this work alive. Now back to what people started noticing. Within minutes of this broadcast, screenshots were circulating online. There was a tweet here and there, comment there. Then another person started asking the same question. Is that Harvey Weinstein? How is he connected to this moment? At first, it sounded like the kind of rumor that appears during every live award show and then disappears just as quickly. Somebody kind of misread a camera angle. They want to go a little viral, so they say something nuts. Usually it's all gone by the morning. There's also a lot of men in Hollywood that look exactly alike. Let me explain why this one didn't fade and why this person so closely connected to Harvey Weinstein was still in the room. So Adrien Brody won Best Actor last year at the 2025 Oscars for his role in The Brutalist. It was celebrated as one of the greatest performances in recent memory. This year, he was back as a presenter, which in Hollywood terms means you were still very much part of the show. You walk the carpet, you do all the things. You're just on the other side of the envelope. And sitting in that room watching him was Georgina Chapman. These two have been together since around 2019. At first, it was really quiet, then more publicly as they started appearing together at film festivals and award shows. By last night, they were obviously unmistakably a couple. We also saw him thank her last year in his acceptance speech. Partners are going to be there for each other to watch somebody you love have a good night. But here's the moment that actually put her on camera and got people like me talking just a year ago. When Brody walked towards that stage to present, he recreated the moment that had become talked about from last year's ceremony, taking a piece of gum out of his mouth and tossing it to Chapman on his way up. It was a callback, a little private joke made in public, charming in a way that those things can be, but like to me, it was kind of ick. It was also meant that Georgina Chapman was not just there. They wanted to make sure she was on camera and part of the broadcast. And that is when the screenshots popped off and people started asking the question that sent everyone down the rabbit hole. That is the completely ordinary explanation for why she was there. Why does anyone care that she was there? Who is she? What does this matter to anyone? Well, she represents a very dark part of this industry's history. And to understand that, let's zoom out for a moment. This is not the story of Georgina Chapman sitting at one seat in the Oscars. It's a story about how Hollywood power works and how power circulates through the industry, how certain reputations are protected, other controversies get absorbed as a result. And we know that this is true across all industries. We see it with our president of the United States and how certain people are still celebrating somebody who is objectively a predator. So for a long time in Hollywood, Harvey Weinstein was one of the most powerful figures on the scene. Through companies like Miramax and later the Weinstein Company, he had influence over which films got made and which actors got roles and even which movies dominated award season. And then in 2017, that power structure came crashing down. We finally had investigations by the New York Times and the New Yorker revealing allegations from women going back at least to the 90s. Stories of meetings arranged under the guise of discussing roles that turned into coercive situations in hotel rooms, where Weinstein would pressure women for massages, expose himself, or attempt sexual acts. Over time, more than 80 real women came forward with accusations of harassment, assault, or rape. The revelations helped ignite the global Me Too movement, hashtag, and eventually led to his convictions for rape and sexual assault in New York in 2020, and then in Los Angeles in 2022. At the time, Weinstein had been married for about a decade to Georgina Chapman, who co-founded the label Marquesa in 2004 with Karen Craig. They met in the mid-2000s, married in 2007, and for years they were a fixture in this elite cultural circle. Film premieres, we saw them at fashion shows, award seasons. When the first investigation came out in October 2017, some of those allegations described events that had happened before they even met. But within a few days, as more women spoke publicly and the scale of accusations became pretty freaking clear, Chapman announced she was leaving him and soon separated from him and took the children. She said she lost 10 pounds in 5 days, that she felt completely humiliated, that she had no idea. Their divorce was then finalized in 2021. And honestly, when I started putting this together and first saw this last year, my reaction was pretty complicated, because your first instinct when you hear the name Georgina Chapman, the ex-wife of Harvey Weinstein, it's to ask the obvious question, like, how do you not know? How do you share a life with somebody for over a decade, move through the same rooms, build a family together, and have no idea that this man is a predator? Or are you complicit in it? And I think that's an understandable instinct, but the more you actually look at how Weinstein operated the NDAs, the private investigators, the way he compartmentalized every part of his life and weaponized his own reputation to keep people afraid, sound like anyone else we know? These were not things happening in plain sight. They were happening in hotel rooms with women who had been threatened into silence by some of the most aggressive legal machinery money could buy. So the way I tend to think about this whole situation is that two things can be true at the same time. On one hand, I don't subscribe to the idea that women should be blamed for men's shitty behavior, especially not the behavior of men that they're married to. Like, you're not our children or our responsibility. The responsibility for what Weinstein did belongs entirely to him and to the powerful people who protected him. But at the same time, it is still worth looking at the environment that surrounds somebody with that much power. When one person has that kind of influence over careers, it inevitably shapes everything around them. Look at the power dynamic between him and his ex-wife. Look at the opportunities, who may feel pressured to stay quiet just by proximity. None of that makes Chapman responsible, again, for his abuse, but it does explain how something like this operated for decades before anyone outside the inner circle understood what was actually going on. And it raises a harder question that I don't think anyone has fully answered. Not necessarily about Chapman specifically, but about all of us who watch that system and watch that system continue to function across all industries and still kind of play it up like it's glamorous. So was Harvey Weinstein at the Oscars last night? No, he's still in a prison cell where he belongs. But his ex-wife was in that room, again, and caught on camera in a moment of genuine warmth with a man she loves, while the industry that protected her former husband for decades gave itself a standing ovation. And again, I'm Lauren Paritra. Willa Paritra is taking a snooze. She looks so cute, but it's hard to change the camera. We fully bootstrap this. We can't do it without you. And we're going to keep digging in. Let us know in the comments what you want to talk more about, what you hate, what you love, and we will be back. We're here every day.